Attention. We are going to be talking on charcoal now. And how many of you are familiar with charcoal? Okay, so quite a bit. Yes. Excellent to always keep in your medicine cabinet to take with you traveling. And this is not a comprehensive or exhaustive lecture on charcoal, but hopefully it is enough to either refresh you in how to use it or to teach you in the basics of how it's used for the body internally and externally, so that you can get some and start using it and getting your own stories and testimonies of how it has worked for you and helped you with things. I'm going to be sharing a few stories as I go throughout as well, but there is just so much about charcoal. We're going to dive right in, and of course, disclaimer. Okay, so this is from a quote from charcoalremedies.com. It's a book I have up here. It says, "We drink water filtered by it, breathe air scrubbed with it, eat food purified through it, wear clothes made with it, grow our food and flowers in it, go to war with it, preserve things in it, enjoy hundreds of dishes cooked by it. We move mountains with it, we make the night sky sparkle with it. We take it with us to the bottom of the deepest oceans and out into space, swim in water washed with it, paint or draw our inspirations with it, and we record man's history of successes and mistakes dipped in it." Now, if you did not know what this lecture was about, would you know what that's talking about? No. That's charcoal. It does all of these things. It is an amazing thing. So here from the British Medical Journal, they reported in 1972, as a demonstration of the effectiveness of charcoal, Bertrand in 1913 survived after swallowing 5 grams of arsenic trioxide mixed with charcoal. And Fleury in 1831 survived after swallowing 15 grams of strychnine, which is 10 times the lethal dose, and an equal amount of charcoal before the French Academy of Medicine. Now, I don't recommend that you try this at home, but that is just showing the efficacy of charcoal and how amazing it is. It truly is something that the list of what it helps is like this, and the list of what it doesn't help is like this. And so it's something, once again, that's always worth trying. If you don't know if it's going to help something or not, it's worth trying it because it's not going to hurt it. It's either going to help or it's just not going to do anything, but it's not going to harm. And so we're talking today about activated charcoal, and that is different from what's in the fireplace. You know, just burnt wood in the campfire or the fireplace is non-activated charcoal. Activated charcoal is what goes through an extra process, and that is it's a very fine powder produced from the controlled burning of wood or other materials in an airless environment, and then subjected to the action of an oxidizing gas at elevated temperatures to create greater surface area. Now, the important thing with activated charcoal is the surface area. The more surface area you have, the more effective that charcoal can be. And you'll find out why as I explain here. So this is a magnified piece of charcoal carbon that you see there, and it's been activated. And in that activation process, it blows holes and ridges and grooves to create surface area. And that makes a cube of charcoal 2/5 of an inch on each side will have a surface area equal to 33 yards square. That's a lot of surface in just a little cube there. Now, why am I making a big deal about this surface area? Well, bear with me. Charcoal does not absorb. Now, that's what you're familiar with, that AB, absorb, the process by which a material imbibes some substance into it. Like if that were a sponge over there and those were droplets of water, it's going down, the water's going into the sponge, it's soaking it up, right? That's absorbing. Charcoal doesn't do that. It does something called adsorb, and that's AD, and that's a process by which some substance gets accumulated on the surface of another material. And so it doesn't go down into it, it just collects on the surface of it. And so the more surface area there is, the more it can collect. Make sense? All right. So the next 2 slides are just a few facts about charcoal. Like I said, it's not completely exhaustive. There's much more that charcoal can do, but these are a few things for you to know. So charcoal does not have an expiration date, but you do need to keep the lid on it. You need to keep it covered or sealed. Now, if you get a bottle of charcoal, whether it's powder or capsules or tablets or whatever, and it has a date, a best by date or expiration date, that's not because it expires, it's because it is required by law to put a date on it. But if you keep it closed, if you just open it up for what you need, take it out and close it right back up, that will last you decades. It doesn't go bad, okay? So don't think that, oh my goodness, this is best by December 2021, so after Christmas I gotta throw the rest of it out? No, just keep it closed. Because as soon as you open it, it starts absorbing things from the air. And so that's why you want to keep it sealed, okay? It has no taste or smell, but it is gritty. It has texture. Some people describe it as like if you mix it in water and drink it down, it's like drinking dirt, but it doesn't taste like dirt. It just has that gritty texture of the dirt. And so some people could care less. I can drink charcoal water down and it doesn't bother me. Other people, it makes them gag and they just can't do it. And so then it's better to either take capsules or tablets of it instead of the powder. It may tattoo if it's used on a fresh, deep wound. So that's if the charcoal powder itself gets into a fresh wound that's in the deeper layers of the skin, then once that heals over, you may forever have a black mark there. And so you want to be mindful of that. You wouldn't put a fresh, deep wound into a charcoal bath, say. Or you wouldn't put a charcoal poultice over it where the charcoal is directly on the skin. You could do a charcoal poultice where you put a layer of paper towel down first over the wound, and then you put the charcoal on it. And it'll still draw through the paper towel. That doesn't stop it at all. But you just don't want it getting down into those deeper layers of the derma. Charcoal combats odors, environmental odors, and body odors. You can get charcoal deodorant, and it works very well. I've used it myself. I've had other people tell me how well it works. And it's amazingly they have figured out to make it where it doesn't stain your clothing. It doesn't, and it controls odor excellently. You can get charcoal inserts for your shoes to help control foot odor. You can get little charcoal balls that you can put in drawers and refrigerators and closets and things like that to control odors, all kinds of stuff. In this book, on your handout, I have, as recommended reading, these 2 books. There are more books on charcoal. It's just these are the 2 that I have read, and so these are the 2 that I recommend. Excellent books. They're just a very basic handbook with all the nuts and bolts that you need by Dr. Thrash. And then this has a whole lot of stories and a bunch of extra stuff besides the nuts and bolts. That's why it's 3 times as long. So whichever way you want there. But in this book, there's a little paragraph about who had a skunk take up residence under their house. And they managed to get the skunk to leave, but the whole house was reminiscent of the fact that a skunk had been there. And so, the book doesn't mention it, but just my imagination goes to, well, what about all the carpets and the furniture and the drapes and your clothes and just all the material that smell would permeate into? How are you going to get that out of the whole house? Well, thankfully, this family knew about charcoal, and they actually had a large bag of it. You can get it in 50-pound bags from certain suppliers. And so they had a bag of it, so the husband of the family, he got their bag of charcoal and he went under the house where the skunk had been and sprayed, and he just spread charcoal all over under the foundation of that house. And within minutes, the smell was gone. Oh. Okay. Thank you. If it goes off again, I'll leave it off. All right. Yeah, and that smell was gone. And so it's just very effective at absorbing odors. You can even do it for bad breath. You can get tablets And if you have bad breath, for most of the causes of it, if you chew up a tablet, it will take away your bad breath. Now you will be left with a black tongue for a while, so don't stick it out at anybody and you'll be fine. But it'll wash off as you eat and drink water and all of that, so it's not a permanent thing. Charcoal absorbs poisons. That is internally and externally. If you go to the hospital with an overdose, guess what they give you? They give you charcoal. Yes. It takes up those poisons. It decreases pain. And another way it does that is by decreasing inflammation, which can cause pain. It draws it out. So like I said, Charcoal Poultice, which I'm going to be demonstrating one way to make them here pretty soon, that is another option that you can use over a painful joint or a painful area or an area of inflammation. It absorbs toxins and viruses and bacteria. And so it is something that is good to take if you have been around someone that's sick and you think that you might have been a little too cozy, exposed, and you want to protect yourself, or if you feel like you're getting sick, or if you are sick. It can decrease the amount of sick time that you have. And it's actually, when I was sick with COVID, Dr. Schwelt came to the Weimar campus there, and he had a one-on-one Zoom call with each of us that were sick. And so in his talk with me, of course, I told him, he asked me what I was doing, so I gave him my list of what I was doing, and he's like, well, I can't really think of anything else to recommend to you, because you're doing it all, but the one thing that he did was he recommended that I take some charcoal. And so by that time, I think I'd been sick for a couple of weeks, so it was a little bit later in the game. But he said that COVID likes to hang out in the intestines, and so the charcoal can help just absorb that and get it out of the system faster. And so it's good to add to that regimen as well. It relieves intestinal gas. Charcoal is great at doing that. If you're going to be eating a meal or a food that you know gives you that experience, then what you can do is take a teaspoon of charcoal or a couple of capsules 30 minutes before that meal, and then the same 30 minutes after. And that will greatly reduce the amount of intestinal gas that you get from that food or from that meal. And it helps to stop diarrhea. Now, one thing about charcoal is the only side effect, so to speak, that they have found, because there basically are no negative side effects, but with some people it can be constipating to them because it does take up water in the bowels. And so that's how it helps with diarrhea, is because it helps to take up that excess water. And for everything except diarrhea and vomiting, you want to take 2 extra cups of water with every dose of charcoal. We're going to be talking about what doses are pretty soon. But if you're taking it for diarrhea or for vomiting, do not take the extra water with it. Now, the extra water is to help keep it from constipating you. But if you're taking it for diarrhea, obviously, you're not wanting to put extra water in there. You want to get rid of that extra water. And if you're doing it for vomiting, then if you drink 2 cups of water on a tumultuous stomach, you're just going to bring it right back up because it's going to irritate it. And so you don't need that extra water for either diarrhea or vomiting. And the thing to do for either one of those is, if you have a bout of either one, then you take a dose of charcoal. If you have another bout, you take another dose. If you have another bout, you take another dose until it stops. And most times, you only need to take 1 to 3 doses, and the diarrhea or the vomiting will subside. It depends on the case, though. If it's more severe, you might need to take more doses, but in most cases, 1 to 3 doses stops those. And so it relieves food poisoning. If you've ever had the unfortunate experience, which I have had, of having food poisoning, you will not want to be without charcoal, because it will be your best friend. Charcoal is something that as soon as you suspect you have food poisoning, you want to start taking it as soon as possible. And so that's something that you always keep it on hand. It's good to take places with you, because even sometimes you may not need it yourself, but someone else will. When I had food poisoning, it was in a group setting. Our New Start staff took a retreat to Yosemite. And one morning, in the middle of the night, I woke up sick. And I didn't find out until the morning that one other person in the group was also up in the middle of the night sick. And no one else of the whole group got sick but the two of us. But we needed charcoal. And I'm so glad that we had it. Charcoal helps in digestion. And so some people wonder or worry about, well, man, if I take charcoal, is it going to just suck all my nutrients up and suck me dry? But actually, no, it doesn't. They have found that you would have to take enormous amounts of charcoal for it to take up nutrients. It's an interesting thing in that it seems to know how God made it, to know how to take up the bad and leave the good. And so something you can take it for indigestion. You can either do the powder, capsule, or tablet for that, or you can take gray water. And this is something I'm going to be talking about more towards the end of the lecture, and how to make it and what to use it for. But this is something that I keep on the kitchen counter all the time. And when I'm having indigestion or GERD or anything like that, then I get out about a half a cup of this gray water and drink it, and usually within 20 minutes I have relief. There was one time where I had to take a second half cup, and then I had relief. So it depends on the severity of your indigestion as to how much you need, but a lot of times just a little bit of that relieves it right up. It absorbs infections internally and externally. So applying charcoal poultices over an infected wound will help to draw out that infection of the area. I personally have a story of a tooth that got infected, as I have a periodontal disease that causes a lot of bone loss inherited from my father. Well, I've lost some molars because of it. And I had this one molar that had a lot of bone loss, and it was kind of getting loose, but it wasn't too painful. I could still eat, and so I did not call the dentist because I like my teeth, I like to hold on to them as long as I can. And there was so much bone recession that caused gum recession that food got up in there, and it created an infection. Well, so then it was painful. So then I did call the dentist. They couldn't get me in for 3 days. Oh, great. So what I did was, at night, after I brushed my teeth, I would get a capsule, charcoal capsule, and I would stick that capsule between my cheek and my tooth and go to bed. And it would be there all night. And the capsule part of it would dissolve enough to where it released the charcoal, but it held it there like a pack. And when I would get up in the morning, I knew it was doing something, because that just tasted nasty. And I spit it out, and I clean my mouth out, and I go about my day, do it again the next night. And I kept doing that until I got to the dentist. Well, when I got there, he took an x-ray because he didn't want to pull the tooth if there was an infection, because then it would spread it. So he took the x-ray, absolutely no infection. So he pulled the tooth, and he looked at it, and he said, "You definitely had an infection there. Because of the 3 roots, 2 of them were eaten almost halfway down with the infection." And so I told him what I did with the charcoal. And he was like, "That is amazing. I've never heard of that. Oh, I've got to tell my other patients." And he was super excited. And so was I. I'm like, "I have no infection. This is great." So anyways, I asked him if I could have the tooth, and he gave it to me. And I have it up here. Sorry if that grosses anyone out, but if anyone wants to look at it, you're welcome to afterwards. But that's just my personal testimony on how I use charcoal to pull out an infection. It whitens teeth, and you cannot scrub very vigorously with it. You have to use it lightly because it is very coarse, and so you don't want to be scratching the enamel of your teeth. But it helps with removing plaque and tartar, and it actually helps with removing stains. And even dentists, I've had dentists, contemplating how in the world does that work? I don't understand it. But we just know that it does. I mean, if you Google tooth whitening with charcoal, you'll get all kinds of things. They make toothpaste with it, and what is it for? It's for whitening the teeth. But like I said, you have to be gentle with it. It absorbs poisons from bee stings, spider bites, snake bites, mosquito bites, any kind of poisonous bite. And how you use it for whatever bite, depends. You wouldn't use it the same for a snake bite as you would for a mosquito bite, obviously. But the ways to do that are in these books. It explains what to do for each circumstance. And I have had several people tell me stories now of how they have used it for a brown recluse spider bite and how effective it was for it, because those are nasty bites and it causes a lot of dead tissue around the bite area. And I had one lady who had gotten a bite on her leg, and she said that she was treating it the medical way and it just kept getting worse and the tissue kept dying around it, and someone told her about charcoal. So she started using it and applying poultice over that area every day and just keeping it on there and changing it. I don't remember how frequently she was changing it, but after a couple of weeks, it was almost healed. So she thought, oh, I can stop. So she stopped using the charcoal and the tissue started dying around it again. And so she went back to using it until it was completely healed, and it just left a tiny little scar. And, I can't tell you not to do any medical way on any of this, but I'm just telling you that, charcoal works with stuff too. And so if you get a snake bite, you can use charcoal on the way to the hospital to get checked out and get some of that poison drawn out as you're going. But it is definitely effective and powerful for getting out poisons from the body. And something, if you get a lot of bee stings, say on the forearm or something, or a lot of mosquito bites, then you can do a charcoal bath in that. Get a basin of water and put the charcoal powder in there and just soak that in the charcoal water, and that will help with drawing out that poison. It's a good marker for transit time, and a lot of people are like, huh? Well, what does that mean? Transit time is the time that it takes when you ingest something to when it exits your body. And that is your transit time. And so it's a good marker for it, because if you take at least a dose or more of charcoal, it's going to turn your poop black. And you're going to know that when you see it in the toilet. And so that can tell you how long it took to get through your system. Say, oh, I took charcoal 10 a.m. on Tuesday for indigestion or whatever it was. And when did you see it in the toilet? That'll tell you. So just remember, if you're not taking it for diarrhea or vomiting, take that extra water so you're not constipating yourself with taking that charcoal and prolonging that transit time. But it's something that can tell you where you're at with your constipation and your regularity. It decreases liver and kidney toxicity. So charcoal is something that taking it internally for liver or kidney issues, and applying poultices externally. So over the liver, or you can put it over the kidneys. And I remember one lady, this was probably close to 10 years ago when I started working at New Start, and she came with some type of kidney issue. I don't remember what it was, but the nurses applied a charcoal poultice over her kidneys for about 8 hours. And the nurse told me afterwards, when she took that off, it smelled like urine because it was just drawing out. And she had worn it overnight. Sometimes we've stopped doing charcoal poultices overnight just because it's hard to not stain the sheets. And so we do it while they're up and about during the day, and it works much better. Our housekeeper is much happier. There's no charcoal stains on the sheets. But you can do it overnight or during the day. But yeah, just drawing out that toxicity. It purifies drinking water. What do we have that filters our waters nowadays? It's charcoal, right? The water filters is one of the big filters that's used. Well, years ago, when they would take long ship voyages and they would be at sea for months at a time, the people on that ship would, towards the end of the voyage, they would be getting sick because the water would always go bad, until they discovered that if they took the wooden barrels that they stored the water in and they burned the inside of it first and then filled it with water, they stopped getting sick because it kept the water pure during those months that they were at sea. So there's just, like I said, this is a little taste of what charcoal can do, but we're going to get going here. Now, burnt food. People ask me this. can I eat burnt toast if I have an upset stomach? Or I've actually had 2 different people ask me, well, what about my barbecue briskets? That's charcoal. Can I like blend it up and drink it down? Please do not. No. It's full of chemicals and toxins and things that you don't want to ingest. Burnt food is not the best source of charcoal. Yes, it is a charcoal, and eating a piece of burnt toast could give you relief from indigestion, but it's not ideal because it is more cancer causing. Burnt foods are more cancer causing, whereas charcoal is not. And so you want to make sure that you're getting that in a healthier form than burnt food. So don't think that you need to be eating burnt sacrifices. Feel better. All right, so common sources. There's more sources, but these are very common ones. Very hard, dense woods, coconut shells, bamboo, so you can see there on the right, nut shells that they make. They also make it with animal bones, so you do need to check your source and make sure that you are getting it from a plant-based source, okay? And if the bottle doesn't say, then call up that. They always have a got questions, call 1-800 number. Call them up and ask them where they source their charcoal from. And you can make it yourself, homemade. Google it. Google will tell you everything you need to know about making activated charcoal. And you can do that yourself. It will not be quite as fine as the commercialized charcoal powder because the homemade one will have more grit to it. But you can do it yourself. All right, so an adult dose is a tablespoon of powder or roughly 4 capsules or 8 tablets. Now it does kind of vary on the capsules because it depends on the size of the capsule and how much they pack it in there. So, you know, company to company, but around 4 capsules is a serving and 8 tablets. The reason you need more tablets is because it's not just pure powder. It's got binders and things in it to form it into tablets and hold them. Otherwise, they would just disintegrate in the powder. And so you need to take more of them. The tablets you can chew or you can swallow whole. I personally believe that they, and I have heard from others that they are a little bit more effective if you chew them, but again, you will have a black tongue for a little while, okay? And if you're doing it for children, it's just half a dose. You want to take charcoal a minimum of 2 hours before or after taking medications and food. So hopefully you can understand why you don't want to take your prescription medications with charcoal, right? You understand this? It recognizes it as poison, basically, and it just absorbs it right up. Now, one thing that you do need to be mindful of is, you know, most medicines, you need 2 or more hours away from taking charcoal. But if you're taking a 24-hour release medication, then taking charcoal at any point is going to mess up with that 24-hour release. So at that point, it's kind of which one do you need more, and judge it from there. But the reason for not taking charcoal with a full stomach, it's not because, like I mentioned, it's not going to suck up all your nutrients or something. It's just that food in the stomach can cut down the effectiveness of charcoal by up to 25%, depending on how much food you have in there. And shall I just keep going? And so if you need to be taking charcoal when you have food in your stomach, just take a little bit extra. That's all. But if you can wait, then go ahead and wait till it's at least a couple of hours, and then take your charcoal, and it will have that full efficacy. All right. So, yeah, okay. Here's a quote for ending here. Every private home should have charcoal on hand as a ready antidote for poisoning and as a cleansing agent in infections and various metabolic disturbances. It can even help with diabetics with their blood sugar levels as well. Orally administered, charcoal is effective in preventing many intestinal infections. All studies show that charcoal is harmless when ingested, when inhaled, and when it comes in contact with the skin. Now, before I finish that quote, that last sentence there, it's harmless when ingested, when inhaled. Like I mentioned, it is a very fine powder, and so you have to work very carefully with it. and you can easily get puffs of powder up, and you will be inhaling it if you do that. And they were worried about this, and so they decided to test the workers at charcoal factories that were breathing in this fine powder all day, every day. And they thought for sure that their lungs would just be black. When they tested them, their lungs were perfectly pink and healthy. The body processes it. And so if you do happen to inhale, don't worry about it. It won't do you any harm. And it's harmless when it comes in contact with the skin. Charcoal is without a rival as an agent for cleansing and assisting the healing of the body. The grains of charcoal have many crevices in the corners, that's that surface area, for the absorption of materials, gases, foreign proteins, body wastes, chemicals, and drugs of various kinds, making it a powerful assistant to the cleansing apparatus of the body. And again, that's by doctor's thrash. There. So you can do it for internally and externally of the body. We're going to take it just by mixing the powder in water. Simply mix it in a cup and then drink it down. Now I will give you one hint. If you are mixing the powder in the water, you want to put the water in the cup first, and then put the powder on top and gently stir that in. Because if you put the powder in there and then you pour water over it, poof, you're gonna get a little volcano. You definitely will be breathing it in. But the problem is staining your clothes, staining the counters, or whatever you're working with. Charcoal does stain easily. Now, if you get in your clothes, shout. The stain remover shout gets charcoal out. Once I discovered that, I quit trying because it would get it out of white shirts. It just gets it out every time. And so that's not a problem. But just, like I mentioned, the tub, your counters, those kinds of things, you want to work carefully with it. So put the water in first and then the charcoal into it. And you can just drink it. Or taking the capsules or the tablets, as mentioned, or the gray water. So this is something super simple to make and just great to have on hand as needed whenever. Like I say, I keep a jar on my kitchen counter at all times. Now you typically make this in a quart jar. I just have this in a little thing because it's my demonstration that I carry around. But all you do is you fill the quart jar with water. You put like 3 to 4 tablespoons of charcoal powder on the top. Put the lid on, don't shake it, just set it on your counter and let it set for 24 hours. And when you pick it up after 24 hours, during that time, all that charcoal is just slowly filtering down to the bottom through that water. And when you can pick it up and see behind it that it's transparent and you don't see any more charcoal falling down, it's ready. You've got your gray water. And so what you can use that for is all kinds of things. You can use that in baby bottles because the babies can't take the actual grittiness. It'll plug up the nipple of the bottle or it'll choke them. But they can drink the gray water. If they're colicky and all upset and having digestion and crying, give them some gray water. You can put it in an eyedropper bottle and use it as eye drops for eye infections. That works very well. You can use it for pink eye and just all those kinds of things. I've done that several times with success. I had one lady when I was sharing this at New Start, she said that her father had been in the hospital with C. diff, which is a very bad bacterial infection, hard to get rid of, and she and her mother knew that charcoal would help him. And so they asked the doctor, can we please give him some charcoal? And the doctor said no. Well, they knew they couldn't sneak it to him because when he pooped it out, the doctor would know that, hey, you gave him charcoal, I told you not to. So what they did was they went home and they made some gray water. They made 16 ounces, so 2 cups. And when that was ready, they took it into the hospital. When no one was looking, they had him drink that 16 ounces. And with that one dose, his C. diff completely cleared up. And the doctor was just so amazed at how his medicine had worked. It just doesn't usually work that good, And so then they did not tell them what they had done. But it's very effective. You don't have to refrigerate it. You just pour off, and as you get down to the bottom, it's going to start stirring up the charcoal, which then you can either toss it out and start with a fresh one, or they do say, the books say that you can reuse the charcoal because it's, it wasn't contaminated unless you put bad water in there. If you're filling it with good water, then you can reuse that. If you reuse it, then you put the water in, all the charcoal is down here, so now you do have to shake it and then let it set. And I have found that once you do that, it has to set at least 3 days in order for it all to settle. But for the first initial one that you do, you put the charcoal on the top, you don't shake it, and it settles in 24 hours, okay? So for using it externally, I talked a little bit previously about using it as a charcoal bath. That can be partial body, like I mentioned with the bites all on the forearm, just doing a partial body bath for that area. Or doing a full body charcoal bath, great for detoxification. If you're in a warm bath or a hot bath, that heat's going to open up those pores, and the charcoal is going to draw out or absorb the toxins. And so it's excellent to do if you're, like I said, if your tub can take it. Charcoal pastes or salves. You can make pastes or salves, or you can buy them. You can get them in little tins. They do come with other ingredients in it. It has some oils in it and some herbs, like this one has chickweed, comfrey, marshmallow, golden seal, amelia, plantain, chaparral, myrrh, vitamin E, olive oil, pine tar, beeswax, and activated charcoal. So there's lots of good herbal stuff in there. And all I do and use it for is I'll get something like a Q-tip, and I'll scoop out what I need, and I'll put it over that area and close it up. And then you're going to want to cover that with like a Band-Aid or something to keep it from making a mess on everything you touch thereafter. And because it has oils in it, you are going to need soap to get that off. You can also get it in little chapstick tubes, some salves you can take camping with you and use it on mosquito bites or bug bites or spider bites or whatever. Just a quick little thing. So those are a convenient and handy way to have a small supply where you don't need to be making tiny little poultices for something. You can have it quickly. Or you can make poultices. And so there's 2 different ways to make them, and I'm going to demonstrate one of those ways. That's the simplest way, the most no mess way, and it's very easy. Now it uses psyllium husk powder, and not everyone can tolerate that. I had a lady at New Start who couldn't use psyllium husk powder, and so I recommended for her to use the other way of making poultices, which uses some sort of thickener like oat flour or cornstarch or ground flax meal, that kind of thing, where you mix the thickener and water and charcoal and you spread it on a paper towel or a material. And then that's your poultice. But that's on your handouts. You can see and read how to make it that option way. I'm just going to demonstrate the other one. And that is, you can do it in a quart-sized bag, or you can do it in a gallon-sized bag. If you do gallon, it's just twice as much. So for a quart size, it's a tablespoon of the psyllium husk powder. In a gallon, it would be 2 tablespoons. And then we're going to do a tablespoon of charcoal powder. I can even see it puffing. I don't know if you guys can, but and we want to cover that up as soon as we have out what we want. And you move slowly with it because you just don't want it making a mess everywhere. And then to that, we're going to slowly pour in a half a cup of water. Now, because this is more closed up and contained, I can pour this water in without it puffing everywhere. But like I said, if I was doing it in a cup or something, you want the water first and then the charcoal. All right, so we want some air in there. We seal that up. And we're just gonna mix this for like 20-30 seconds. And it starts thickening up quite quickly. And you're just making sure you get any lumps of that psyllium powder squished up, and it's already starting to thicken, and it's almost ready. All right. So once it's nice and thick, we're going to then let the excess air out. And we're going to be squishing it till it fills the bag, one nice even layer. And if you're OCD, you can use a rolling pin to get it nice and even. And there's the Charcoal Poultice. Now, you don't apply it like this to your body, obviously, but it's all thickened up and gelled and ready to go. I don't know if you can kind of get an idea of it in there. How you are going to use this is depending on whatever size area you need it for. Say you just need a quarter of the bag. So you're gonna cut out that quarter and you're gonna take off the one layer of the plastic so that you're exposing the charcoal. And you can either put that directly on the skin, or like I said, if you don't want the charcoal directly on the skin, you can put a piece of paper towel over that and then apply that to the skin so that it keeps it cleaner. And once you have it on there, you're going to wrap it with plastic wrap. Now that's going to be squishing out the edges. So you want to make sure that you get at least an inch, I would recommend 2 inches, beyond the border of the poultice to give it that squish room. Okay? And you just wrap it with saran wrap, and then you're going to secure it with either a cloth or a towel or an ace bandage just to hold it in place as long as you need for wearing it. You know, depending on what area of the body you put it onto. And because you have cut out a section, now this is like exposed, and you want to seal it back up. So you're just going to get a gallon bag, put it in the bag, and seal that bag up. And put it in your fridge, and it's ready to just grab for when you need it again. It'll last in the fridge for a couple of weeks, or if you don't think you're going to be using it up in those couple of weeks, then put it in the freezer. And it'll defrost very quickly. It's thin. It'll get hard in the freezer because of the water, but it will defrost quickly, and then you can just cut out whatever portion you need again and keep it in the freezer indefinitely. And so that is just a super simple way of making, and a no-mess way. As you can see, I didn't get it everywhere. A no-mess way of making a charcoal poultice. So the charcoal poultices that you make with these thickeners and you mix it in a bowl and spread it, it ends up looking like this. I did this with a Chuck's pad, so it has that plastic on one side, and I covered it with a paper towel and then taped down all 4 edges. And so this is the charcoal side. That's the side that will be applied to the body. And because it has that plastic there, you don't need to use the plastic wrap. You just need to put the ace bandage or secure it down on the area. If you don't use an ace bandage, you can just simply spread that charcoal mixture onto a paper towel and then cover it with another paper towel, tape down the edges, same thing, and then apply that. But you do want to then wrap it with the plastic. And now the reason for wrapping with the plastic and having a thickener is because if charcoal dries out, if you just do charcoal and powder and water, it will dry out, and as soon as it dries out, it stops its action. It doesn't draw anymore. And so it has to be kept moist. And so we add thickeners and wrap it in the plastic to keep that moisture in there so that it keeps working. If you do it this way, you can make up a whole bunch of poultices ahead of time. So you have everything out at once, fold them up, put them in a Ziploc bag, and store them in the fridge or the freezer, ready to grab and go. And that way you don't have to be making a new poultice every time you need it. Okay? All right. I think Yeah, those were just the ways of making it. So that's the way I just demonstrated it to you. And that way, and the other is on your handouts that you have received. So that is it for charcoal. I hope you learned something or were refreshed on something. And you have been an excellent audience, paying a lot of good attention and appreciate your time. Susan is going to be sharing something with us now. Selenium, that is a health food source. Yeah, the Psyllium husk powder. Psyllium husk. Yeah. Yeah.
You are an excellent presenter. Thank you. Yes. You have kept our attention. The hours have sped by. It doesn't even seem like we've been here as long as we have been. So just thank you so very much. Are there any other questions that you want to ask April before we wrap things up? We have a couple minutes, and so if you have a pressing question, now would be the time to ask her before we just close things up. Yes.
Do they have a program at Weimar where you can go and kind of hands-on learn these?
The natural remedies, unfortunately, they don't anymore. They didn't have enough student interest to keep the program open, and so they had to shut it down a few years ago. But I went through it probably about 3 years before it closed. Yeah. They have other things now. They have the health program, which is a little different. It teaches you a bit of hydrotherapy and massage, the basics of it, as well as how to present certain programs in churches and how to become like a Bible worker or a health coach, that kind of thing. That's a 4-month program, but they don't have the medical missionary course anymore. Yeah, which is very sad.
So that's you doing it for us.
Yes. Take it and share it.
Thank you. Anyone else? We can do one more question.
Oh, just one more, no, something else.
How would you handle a snake bite if you had one?
A snake bite, that is more serious. Basically, you want to be just quickly mixing the charcoal with water and putting it on directly onto the bite and freshening that every 10 minutes. And also take it internally, and doing this on your way to get help. And then probably every 10 minutes, I would say for the first hour that you're changing that out. And then as more poison gets out, you can, gradually decrease that. And then go to where you're wearing a poultice, changing a poultice every hour, and then every couple hours, and gradually, yeah. It depends on the bite and how much poison you got too. I mean, but you are aggressive with it.
Okay. Did you have a quick question?
When someone's going to go through chemotherapy, and they're taking chemotherapy, it's got to go all over, for cancer. But it's got to go through your liver, it's got to go through your kidneys, and it doesn't really need to be there. I was thinking, I wonder if it would be wise to take a little charcoal before reality of chemo to protect your liver.
They
It doesn't get swollen, inflamed,
Yeah, taking charcoal for chemotherapy, it can be helpful with taking up some of that. And it's something that even the nurses at our New Start has talked about, with patients being able to take the charcoal for helping with their chemo effects. And it's safe to do. It helps with decreasing the toxicity in the body that causes all that sickness.
I wonder if it would block the chemo effect though, if it would block it.
In fact, you would want to work with your doctor on it, not be taking it on the side kind of thing. You would work together with it. And
so it helps besides milk thistle and stuff like that. It would help protect the liver and kidneys.
And charcoal also helps with absorbing the toxins that cause anemia from cancer, because the cancer is putting off toxins that then creates the anemia, and the charcoal can absorb those and help in decreasing that anemia also. So it is helpful in cancer conditions. It doesn't absorb cancer,
No,
you know,
but it's
but
not
of
harmful.
the
and
secondary
helps
things,
with-
yeah.
Thank you.
And I have a quick question. When you have bacteria in your gut, you know how they say you have to go to the bad bacteria and you can diagnose. Is there a way to be able to get rid of it with charcoal, the gray water?
Charcoal, yeah, the gray water or any forms of those because it does absorb bacteria. But like I said, it leaves the good and it takes up the bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that will be a good segue to advertise for next month.
Yeah.
We're going to be on the second Sunday again, and this is the Healing Plate, same place, and we will be focused on nutrition. And Dr. Chung, who gave us our opening segment for this one, will talk a little bit more about the explosion of information that is now available to the microbiome and the necessity of keeping a healthy gut. So he'll be talking about that a little bit, and we will have some food demonstrations. So we will be focused on healthy food, food that supports gut health, talking about eating our prebiotics, and so please plan to come because it'll be another exciting, it will not be 4 hours. We're not going to try to pack that much in again, but this was April coming to us from quite a distance, and we didn't want to make her have to come repeatedly. I don't even know if she would have time in her schedule, so we were just grateful that we could pack as much in as we could.
Thank you.
So I would like to just end on a spiritual note about water. And so I'd like to take you to John 4. You all know that passage about the woman at the well. And so this is kind of looking at water from a slightly different perspective. But one of the things that we do know when we just take this all in is that there's a divine design to food, to all of these things that have been put into our environment. When God spoke these things into existence, the life force that came with who He is and His energy was involved in making what we see in our environment. Whether it is the grass that's growing or a kale, a plant, or the water. Can man make water? That's an impossibility. And how essential it is for life. And we've been learning about the application of water externally. And so one of the things that we sometimes ponder is what weight does our spiritual beliefs have on our health? This is a difficult thing for people to actually examine and weigh and say, there's a direct line from this to this. It is something that people are trying to figure out. You've probably all heard of the social determinants of health. These are some of those things that get to spirituality and to social support networks and those kinds of things. And we learned as we were going into COVID that there were some things that were very valuable as we realized that we couldn't worship in the same way that we once did, at least here in California, that they've done quite a bit of research on the value of actually being in a church pew. Mm-hmm. And that this is something that contributes to not having to use an emergency room as much. It decreases anxieties, it decreases depression. And so these are all things that we're learning about our spiritual beliefs and the effect that they have on our health and well-being. So that's why I want to close with this beautiful parable of the woman at the well. And you're all familiar with this story, most likely. And I think we have a real rooster or something out there that is making this noise at just the right times. So unless it's, I don't know, but I've heard it before. So in any case, we have something that's quite relevant about this story for our time, because we have Jesus, a Jew, who is walking into Samaritan territory, and the Jews and the Samaritans don't get along. Does this sound familiar by any chance? We are in a world where people are not getting along very well, and we have challenges with prejudice and many other things. And so this story has a lot of message on different levels. So Jesus has been walking with his disciples for most of the morning. They're going to Galilee, but they are cutting through Samaria. And so the disciples go off to buy some food, and Jesus is left sitting at this well, and he's thirsty. The Samaritan woman comes along, and he says to her, "Would you give me a drink?" And she's wondering, why is he asking me? He's not even supposed to be talking to me. We don't get along. And so the story, well, it would help if I was in the right book. Somehow my pages got flipped in here. So it takes us to the well. And the story goes, then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you healing water, living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into an everlasting life." So you can imagine that this woman was rather curious and intrigued by this conversation she was having with Jesus. And she said, "Okay, I'd like to have some of that living water." So he said, "Okay, go get your husband." Well, she said, "I don't have a husband." And Jesus said, "You're saying it very well. You do not have a husband. You've had 5. And the man you're with right now is not your husband." And then she said, well, you can imagine what she might say. Here's a man that could see her whole life. And she said to him, "I perceive you are a prophet," because he could read her life. And so she said, "Yes, I would like to have some of this water." And as she was talking with Jesus, because of course, this wasn't just any well they were at Jacob's well. Interestingly, Jacob was a common ancestor for both the Jews and the Samaritans. They had lineage in common, but yet they were not getting along. But as she was chatting with Jesus here, she realized that this was somebody that she could trust. And so she said, "I would like that living water." What does she realize that she was getting in this living water? She was getting a gift of grace. She was getting power to transform her life. And she was looking for something better than what she had. And so when you think about this story, it's got a couple different levels that you can think about the application. One is, do we share this living water with others in terms of being gracious and kind and benevolent and a healing influence with the people that we encounter? And the other level really does get to how we treat each other. Because Jesus could have been critical of her, and he wasn't. He wasn't at all critical. Instead, he was kind and compassionate and courteous and respectful. And so I just leave us with this message of thinking about what kind of influence we have on others in terms of the interaction we have on a daily basis, and how we might be able to share this information that we've learned today, how we might apply it in our lives, and also how we just take this healing effect, not only of the benefits of water, it has healing properties because of the divine design. But in all of these things, all of these things, they start with the hand of God. But then on another level, how we treat one another. And the way that we treat one another, it may be that we have a small circle of influence, but by person, by being a healing and a kind influence, that ripples out across many, many people as we continue to share this grace and love with others. So I just want to end on that note as we're trying to tie this all together. We're talking about mind, body, spirit. And when we're looking at healing, we're looking at the whole person. And we're sharing these things because that's what they do. They are not just having an impact on your body. When you're exercising a choice, when you have a belief that these things can make a difference, that's part of the healing. So I just want to leave you with that thought. I thank you enormously for being here with us this afternoon. This has just been such a rich and a blessed experience for all of us. And so I wish God's blessings on you. I want to close with prayer. And I also want to ask you one thing before we leave. And that is, if you picked up a card, one of those little note cards, this is our little way of assessing the day. So I would like you to put two things on that card. No names, nothing needed. You can just drop it off on the table in the back and we'll look at them. One thing, what would you like to know more about? As we're looking at these workshops, what would you like to know more about? Just write that on there. The second thing, what from today would you be likely to use? What from today would you be likely to use? So we can just take a look at that and use it as a very simple way of taking a look at the day and what you'd like to see in the future. So as we are thinking about mind, body, spirit, let's just bow our heads for a moment of prayer. Father, we are so thankful for every person in this room. We are so thankful for April and what she has shared with us today. We are so thankful that it is your purpose that we be well, mind, body, and spirit. And so I just ask that you would be with us as we leave here today, that you would be with us through the coming week, that we would be able to meet again next month as we continue to explore more about these natural remedies, the benefit of food. Food doesn't just have its ingredients because that's the way it comes out of the ground. It has those ingredients because it comes from your hand. So Father, we just ask for your healing hand and your hand of mercy and your hand of grace, to be upon us as we leave today. Thank you so much for loving us and for hearing and answering our prayers. Amen.
Amen.